We ready? Okay, welcome to our library series, the Big Country Master Gardeners. My name is Ann Pierce. I'm going to show you some pictures first, but thank you for coming. We're going to talk about container gardening, which is a challenge in Abilene, Texas. So welcome, and y'all ready to get started? Yes. So you can go home and start growing your tomatoes, right? So container gardening is a really big topic, and it really can refer to any flowers, shrubs, trees, and stuff like this. But the focus of this presentation is really going to be about growing food in containers in West Texas, particularly in Abilene. It's just going to be based on my experience and then what I have learned through the Master Gardening education and program. And honestly, probably 90% of what I learn is hands-on. Like, you just have to get your hands on, and you just have to try it again and try again and try again. And some years, you can have a perfect setup, and the weather is just horrible, and that hailstorm comes through at the end of May and wipes out everything. Like, just, it is what it is in Abilene, Texas. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to show you a couple of pictures first. Can everyone kind of see that? You can kind of see. So container gardening, people think of as you have a small space, you're going to get a couple of pots and throw some dirt in it and grow. I have a co-worker who lives out in Hamby on a couple of acres, and he has 2 greenhouses. He built these out of pallets and a landscape plastic, I forget what it's called. And he's got 2 of these, and inside he's got between 60 and 80 containers. These are those lick tubs that you get from ranchers, farmers ranchers. They're about 20 gallons, give or take. He's got 60 to 80 of these containers at any given time because it's too hard to grow in the ground. He feeds his family of 4. This is a lot of work. You can't see these, but these are his lettuces. Right there, he's got some tomatoes. He grows beans. He grows squash. He does do potatoes in containers. He does onions in the ground. More lettuce, more tomatoes. I believe this is a pepper plant. Come on in. So I just want you to know, containers aren't necessarily just because you have a small space. You can have a huge space and still grow in containers. So the purpose of our growing is to what? Eat, right? Like I tell people, I can grow a lot of things, but I want to be able to eat what I grow. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. So these are a couple of my containers in my backyard right now. These are those big old black nursery pot containers that you get trees in and stuff like that, right? And you see, I paint mine white because I think the black absorbs too much heat and heats up the soil too much. So I have gone through and I've painted all of my black ones white. That's not necessarily something they tell you to do, but that's just my own personal experience with our heat and the heat of the soil.
And what kind of paint do you use?
It's the Lowe's. It's a
Latex.
A what?
Latex.
A latex? No. It's just something from Lowe's. It's just a spray paint from Lowe's is what I use, and it's on the outside of the container, so I'm not worried about any food issues or anything like that. And we're going to talk about that with plastics here in a minute. So over here, let me go back here. So I don't know if you can see this very well. This container right here are potatoes, and this container here are potatoes. I put those in at the exact same time from the exact same seed potatoes that I got at Jackson Brothers. These are, that tall. Who knows? I don't know why. But now the container, the blue container, they're catching up. They're catching up. But and then I've got 4 tomato plants right there and a little basil. So you can kind of see I've got plastic. You see they're up next to the fence, and I've got plastic. I'm hardening them off over there. Do you know the term hardening off? So the term hardening off is you don't want to take your little transplants from your house and put them outside in one day, especially in the sun, because that little plant will not survive. And it will not survive in our wind either. So what I've done is I've put them in the containers next to my fence with plastic to protect from the wind. So I can pull that plastic up, I can protect them. I can pull that plastic down when there's no wind, but they're in filtered sun right there. I have put a marigold in with each container. Marigolds are supposed to repel certain pests. So that's just how I've got them started. You can't really see this. This is fennel. I've got a separate container for my fennel because I love to see the black swallowtail butterflies and the caterpillars, and that's what they go for. But fennel is not a good companion plant to tomatoes. So you don't want to plant, there's some things you do not want to plant together or near each other because they don't work. So these are some pepper plants that my son is growing in fabric containers. Has anyone ever used a fabric container? Okay. Did you have success? Yes. Did you grow it outdoors? Awesome, because I did not have any success with my fabric pots outside. For me, and I used them mostly for herbs, but for me, they aired out too fast. And the black didn't get hot like the black plastic, but that airflow was great. So my son actually grows these in the house. He uses the fabric container, he grows them in the house, he's got the little water trays underneath, and they're great. They are a great grow, very lightweight, right? But for me, they didn't work outside. I love this little setup with a little frame, and you can put your containers inside there. This would be super, super easy if you were going to put in a drip irrigation system. Drip irrigation like a soaker hose or something like that. You could run it along each of those. This is not my backyard. I do not have that skill to build that. I just left my containers around. And these containers right here are referred to as wicking type containers. Have you heard that concept, wicking containers? So the idea here is that there's something at the bottom here, probably some kind of pebble or rock or something that's going to hold the water. And so the watering is going straight down to the bottom, and the plants are getting water from the bottom of the soil instead of you putting the water on top of the soil. Does that make sense? Again, I've never tried this before, but I have started looking into it because several of the YouTubers that I follow will say these wicking containers are by far the most efficient with water usage and not overwatering your plants. So, I think that's, okay.
Leave that. What are those spouts?
So it's probably some time of drainage if the water gets too high. Again, these are not mine, and I'm just kind of guessing that if the water gets too high, like if there's a rain, right, and the water gets too high, it's going to drain all the excess water that you don't want sitting on top of whatever that reservoir is on the bottom. So you have in front of you a handout. I did this presentation last week at the other library location, and I didn't like the flow of it, so I'm kind of changing the flow, but all the information that we're going to talk about is in here. But please feel free to ask me any questions if I'm not hitting on something that you would like me to hit on. Okay? So A lot of advantages to container gardening, living in West Texas. We do have clay soil. It's not the easiest to work with. John, bless his heart, is a in-ground kind of person, but I can't do it. I'm a single mom. I can't do it. I have to go with my containers. And I love my containers because I can move them around. When I first started, I would go to estate sales and garage sales, and I would try to find pretty containers for, you know, a good price, right? I've tried the clay, the ceramic, and whew, those get pretty heavy when you fill them with soil, and you know, I wanted to have Martha Stewart's, you know, container garden. That was the look I was going for, and it did not get me any more tomatoes or peppers or anything. I think these are so ugly, but honestly, I've used them now for probably at least 5-6 years, and these are the greatest things ever. This is just a 5-gallon paint bucket, paint size. You got to put a bunch of holes in it. It doesn't matter what kind of container you have. If you don't have enough holes, and that was the other thing with some of the clay and ceramic containers, they might have one drainage hole. That's not enough unless you're putting something inside of it. But again, it just, for me, it's a weight issue. You can see the holes here. Some of the YouTubers I see have much bigger holes, but this is the largest bit that we have in our garage, so that's what I use. So you've got to have a lot of holes in it. I also like holes on the side that give it a little bit of airflow from the side. Your soil needs airflow. Your soil needs airflow, and that's how I do it. Plastic. Lightweight, easy to move around, right? But you want to make sure it's a food-grade plastic. How do you make sure it's a food-grade plastic? One of your handouts right there, it might be on the back, is your symbols for food grade. Now, this one is great because it has it stamped right there, but not all of them do. Do you have the, it should be the second page maybe? Yes, yes. It's green on one side and red on the other side. So there are your symbols. Really, if you're going to grow anything you want to eat, I really would look, you know, keep that in mind. You really want to stick with something that's going to be a food-grade plastic. And those are your symbols. So when I go to estate sales or garage sales and I forget, is it a 2 or is it a 5? I pull it up on my phone and I just make sure I can find a symbol and that it is food grade. 5-gallon containers is great for your my peppers. This is where most of my pepper plants go, is in these 5-gallon containers. Your lettuces, if you want to just do lettuces, they're great in 1 or 2-gallon size containers. Unless you want to get the bigger containers, then you can put multiple plants in there. Broccoli, this is about a 3-gallon right here. Broccoli would go great in here. So your container really is going to depend on what you're trying to grow, generally. Unless you've got one of those big ones, then you can pop a bunch of different things in there. But when you do pop a bunch of different plants into a large container, you want to make sure that they are companion plants, that they do go together. So like basils and tomatoes go together great. What doesn't grow in containers? Well, let me back up just tomatoes. Everyone try to grow tomatoes here, like that's where I started. Everyone wants to grow tomatoes. So I've seen several people, and I've even talked to some nurseries that will say you can grow tomatoes in 5-gallon containers. And I have tried to grow tomatoes in 5-gallon containers, and I just don't get very much fruit. And through our Master Gardener program, I've talked to a couple of our experts, several, like professors. We'll have professors come from the universities and extension centers. And almost everyone that I've talked to locally will say, here in West Texas, you really want no less than 7 or 8 gallon containers for your tomatoes. It just doesn't work very well because our tomatoes down here, our heat down here, we need more soil for our tomatoes. So I do not grow tomatoes in here. I have 8 and 10 gallon containers where I grow my tomatoes. So we're good on containers, types of containers, what to look for when getting your containers. Let's jump into yes, ma'am.
The little containers you get from the garden shops.
Yeah, so there's something else that has come in here probably that I've got.
But those aren't food grade, are they?
Yeah. If they're from the garden shop, I will use them. So yeah, I definitely regrow, and that's kind of a good point that I'm thinking of. Whenever you do reuse your containers from the nursery, you want to clean them. Like you want to use soap and water to clean them. If you really want to be good, you can splash some alcohol, rubbing alcohol, to really kill any germs, because you really don't know what the soil is that's been in there. And so anytime I reuse my containers, I do try to clean them. All my little ones I definitely clean, but and these containers right here, they will get fragile in the sun over time. I empty the soil out of these at the end of my growing season every year, and I do rinse them. I may not put soap or anything, but I rinse them good. I let them dry, I stack them, and then I store these in the shade. I'll store them outside, but I store them in the shade. So I should be able to get 4 or 5 growing seasons out of one of these containers, at least. So these containers, too, they cost about $5, give or take. I think they're a little bit less expensive at Walmart. They're a little more expensive at Lowe's and Home Depot, but that's why I hit garage sales and estate sales. You can get these for about $1 or $2 at garage sales, estate sales. I see a lot of people with birdseed. If it's had birdseed in here, it's generally a food grade container as well. So I don't spend money on containers anymore if I don't have to. I'm going to put my money in the soil. And so that's kind of where I'm going to go to the next thing is how do I fill up my containers? Where do I get my soil? So I've drilled my holes. I've walked around the yard and I've picked up all my sticks, different size sticks. Now, I don't have any trees in my backyard, but both of my neighbors have pecan trees, so I get all of their pecan tree, all of the limbs that come from their pecan trees. So when I'm getting ready, first thing I'm going to do, even though I have holes here, I'm going to throw a bunch of sticks in the bottom here. Again, just to give some air in the bottom of that container. So you can see, it doesn't have to be full, but it's going to give you some air at the bottom of that container. That's a technique that I see over and over and over and over. So I think that's a pretty kind of a well-known idea that you want that airflow. The second thing I will put in my container is a cocoa coir mix. Does anyone know what cocoa coir is? I get a couple head shakes, yes? I don't want to tell you something you already know. So this is cocoa coir. Cocoa coir is made from the coconut husk. You get your coconut is your nut, and then that husk that's on the outside. So it's a waste product, and they figured out it is a great growing medium. It has no nutrients in it, but this is the brick, what we call the brick. This is what it is when you wet the brick and it expands. It goes into this, and it's got all these little hairs and fibers and stuff. This is great. I'm going to pass this around so you can touch it and feel it. Cocoa coir, I think, is really essential for the bottom of your container. Again, to keep the water from sitting in the bottom. You don't want water sitting in the bottom. Even though you have holes, you still want that airflow in the bottom of your container. And cocoa coir is a great medium. So you can buy it in the brick. You can do what?
Does it degrade?
So what happens is, what I've seen is over time, so at the end of the growing season, I empty my containers into a tarp, into a big tarp, because I'm going to reuse my soil. I cannot afford to go buy new soil every season for all of my containers. That would cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So I have to be creative. So when I empty my containers, it has mixed with the soil at the bottom of the container. And it probably does degrade a bit, but it still has use for the next year. Like it's still part of the soil for the next year. It's not going to hurt anything. When you get this brick and you add water to it, it expands and fills it up. So in this size container, I put a half of a brick in this size container. Half of a brick. I don't want to mess with the water. I don't want to mess with, it takes a long time. You've seen those fun little, toys and stuff like that kids, you add water to and then it expands and stuff like this. It's fun for kids to play in if you want to do that, but I don't want to do that. But by adding it to the bottom of my container, once I start watering, it's going to expand and fill up that whole bottom of the container. Does that make sense? You can also buy cocoa coir in bags, just, big bags like this. You can buy it, and it's already mixed with perlite. Perlite is also a very good material for drainage, for water drainage. You want it mixed with your soil and your cocoa coir for good drainage. So you can buy either the bricks of the cocoa coir or you can buy it in a bag, and it's really easy then. Yes, ma'am?
Where do you buy that?
The perlite?
No, the brick.
The cocoa coir. Okay, so here's my trick. What did I do with my other brick? Did I? Oh. So this I got at Garden World for $6.99. I've never seen cocoa coir at any of the big box stores, but I think most of your nurseries, Garden World, Jackson Brothers, Mankin and Sons, Willow Creek, those are all your good nursery, gardening, agriculture kind of centers. There's Abilene Ag, but I've never been to Abilene Ag. They probably all carry the bricks. This brick right here is $7. That's not cheap, which is why when I put it in this size container, I'm going to cut it in half, and I only need half of it, and so I can get 2 containers out of this. Trick, secret, I don't know. If you go to the pet store, if you have any snakes or lizards or other reptiles, the pet stores carry this for their reptiles, and they will sell at Petco. You can get 3 bricks in a package for like $15. And it's the same stuff. So you can find it a little bit less expensive if you want to go to the pet store.
I got it from Amazon, and I've gotten like 5 bricks for $22 or $25.
You can do it like that. Like I just happen to be a local shopper. I'm from a family of local business, and so my dad's just trained us not to buy online, and we're going to buy local, and that's kind of what we do. So that, when you can, there's some other product that you cannot. But so I think the cocoa coir has no nutrients. Remember, it has no nutrients, but it's really important for your drainage particularly in your containers. And the perlite. If y'all want to, I think everyone has seen all those little white pieces in your soil. That's what that is perlite. You can also use vermiculite, is another ingredient that works just the same way, but vermiculite's more expensive than perlite. So that's why I go with perlite. I think probably everyone knows peat moss. Everyone knows peat moss. The cocoa coir serves as the same purpose as peat moss. If you like peat moss and you want to use peat moss, and there's all sorts of peat moss bags at the garden center, you can use peat moss instead of cocoa coir. You don't have to use cocoa coir. I just choose cocoa coir for environmental reasons. I think it's environmentally better than peat moss. So that's why I use the cocoa coir. But you can use peat moss, you can use perlite, you can use vermiculite, okay? So that's the next thing that's going to go into my container. Then what I do is I use a premium, does everyone know the difference between dirt and soil? Or dirt and soil, like, kinda like, so I use the word soil very generically, but our dirt does contain nutrients and ingredients, even as clay as it is. It's got acidity issues and some other things like this. So when you're putting into the ground, you're going to use a bag of what's called garden soil, right? You're going to use a garden soil in the ground that's going to mix with your dirt, your in the ground dirt. When you're dealing with containers, you have no other place for your plants to get nutrients except what's inside. That's the only place you have. So I have a tendency to go with more premium brands. And the reason I like the premium brands the most is because it tells you what's in it. I want to know what's in my soil. Both of these, so this says potting soil, this says potting soil. In the container gardening side of things, we refer to it as a potting mix, and that's what you will maybe hear the term is potting mix. So if you go into a garden center and you say, I want potting soil or potting mix, this is what goes into the pot. You can put it in the ground, of course, but you don't want to mix your garden soil in your containers. Your plants will grow in garden soil. That's not a problem, but we're trying to produce fruit. So your plants need more nutrients than what a garden soil is going to give it. Maybe first season you might get a grow out of it, but you're not going to be able to reuse it. These I can reuse. I've heard some people say you can reuse for maybe 4 growing seasons, up to 4 growing seasons. But you want to know what's inside your soil. I want to know what's inside my soil. These have all the ingredients that I want inside my soil. Again, your garden centers, your big box stores are not going to sell a premium product. They're going to sell, so I think everyone knows. And look, I want to put this on the record. I'm not endorsing any products. This is not about endorsing. It's about why I'm choosing these products because of the nutrients they have inside. I think everyone knows this brand, and if you look, it doesn't really tell you the ingredients, and probably because this is such a big company, they have to source their product from so many different parts of our country that they can't really put in what's in this bag because they're sourcing from too many locations. The other thing sometimes you'll see on your bags, it'll say it's sterilized. Be careful about sterilized soil because when it's sterilized soil, they've also removed the good bacteria. Usually they have to sterilize soil that comes in from out of the country. That's very, very regulated. So if something says sterilized soil, I wouldn't buy it because they've taken the good stuff out. You can buy it if you want to put a bunch of good stuff back into it. Does that make sense? So in order to stretch my dollars for my soil and to fill up my containers, every year when I'm finished with my growing season, I will empty my soil into a big old tarp. This is a 10 by 12 foot heavy duty tarp. I put it in the tarp. I mix in some, generally I'll use a molasses, I'll use a humus, humus. Some, you want to add some nutrients. I'll usually add a bag of like manure, maybe some kind of compost, and I mix it all in the tarp. I tie up my tarp, or I fold it over, try to compact it, and then I let it sit there over the winter time for November, December, January, February, and then I get it out, and so now I have a big old mound of soil that now I mix about half of that used soil. That's still good because I'm using a premium, but I'll mix half of my used soil with half of my new premium soil. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah? So that's how I get my soil. Excuse me? What a great question. So I keep all of my containers on pallets, and that's part of the presentation, so I'm glad you reminded me. I keep all of my containers on pallets. I do not put any container on the ground for a couple of reasons. Ants. And any other kind of crawling things that like to stay in the soil. So yes, occasionally I will get ants. Depending on, so like right now, I've never really had an ant problem because I keep my containers and my tarp. I keep my tarp on a pallet as well. I keep it off of the ground. But yesterday I went out to look at my plants, and in one of my containers I see all this, the soil crumbs and everything. I'm like, are you kidding me? And I start tapping the side of my container, and here comes the little ants. First time ever I've had ants in a container.
Were they fire ants or just a regular ant?
I don't know, because I didn't have time to really mess with it at that moment. And so my temporary fix, it's not a permanent fix yet, unless it works, is I got one of those trays, those planter trays, and I filled it with water, and I just put my container right down into it. Again, it's nice to be able to lift up your containers and put them right into that little tray, and so I'm trying to drown the ants out right now.
Did they swim to the top?
No, so this morning when I went out there, there were no ants.
Because a fire ant will swim.
Yeah.
They'll swim even in the colony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why I was trying to figure out whether they were fire ants or just a general variety common ant.
So I'm one of those that I put whatever poison I can find on fire ants and move them to my neighbor's backyard. Like, that's really, like, my neighbors don't seem to care to get the ants.
So you've moistened your yard where you generally don't have fire ants. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I do, yeah. And I use diatomaceous earth a lot, which is not really for fire ants or anything, but if I'm afraid of anything around where my pallets are, I'll use diatomaceous earth. I'll use diatomaceous earth on the plant as well, right, and in the soil. But once it gets wet, once you water and it gets wet, it loses its effectiveness. So
I use cayenne pepper.
So I have a former mother-in-law that came to visit from Canada and saw a fire ant mound and got a bottle of bleach and poured it into the fire ant mound before I knew what was happening. And I said to my husband, what in the world is your mother doing? Well, she's killing the fire ant, the ant bed. I said, bleach will not kill a fire ant mound. He said, oh yeah, it will. Oh, no, it won't. And it doesn't. I promise, bleach does not kill fire ants. But I had a big old spot like this in the middle of my backyard that didn't grass up for a couple of years. Like, it was just, I couldn't believe it. Anyway, okay. So we've got our container, we got our holes, we've started filling it, we've got our sticks, we've got my cocoa coir. I've started now, I'm going to use a mix of my old soil, my new soil. And something I add to every single container, it does not matter what I am growing, I add a shovel, hand shovel, probably the equivalent of 1 to 2 cups of worm castings. Worm castings are pure nitrogen. This is one of the best nutrients you can give your roots when you put something in that container. They will not burn your roots. These are awesome. This bag right here is $40. It's not cheap, but it lasts me for, so this is a bag left over from last year. I had a little bit left over last year, and I bought a new bag this year, but, so this is probably a year and a half, maybe, worth of worm castings. This is your best source of nitrogen going right to the roots. It absorbs it right away. It's great for growth. I add it to every container that I plant that I want to eat from.
Even the bigger ones, do you?
So my bigger ones, I don't empty my big 20-gallon ones. I don't empty my 20-gallon containers into the tarp. I might take the top, maybe that much off of the top, and I'll empty that out, and then I mix up. It's really important that you know whether the water is draining through your containers or not, and the only way for me to know that is if I take that top off of that, out of that container, and I go and I mix up my soil every time. And almost every time I go do that, I add a little bit of perlite to the bottom of my soil and keep mixing it in. Or if I have some, extra cocoa coir that's already made up or something like that, I'll add that to the bottom of that container and mix it in. And then I'll go back and top it with my good soil. Yeah, so we're here there. We're here on this. So the next thing I'm going to do, I always leave a good, maybe, what's that, 3 inches? Maybe 3 to 4 inches? I leave the soil down below, okay? And depending what I'm putting in, if I'm putting in both tomatoes and peppers, I use this soil because the fertilizer, you see the fertilizer is your number right here. This is how much nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium is contained in this fertilizer. This is a powder fertilizer, what is referred to as a slow release. Have you heard of the term slow release? It's just a powder. It's a slow release. And I will add this, again, to the top of my soil when I put my transplant in.
Is that organic or chemical?
Excuse me?
Is that an organic or a chemical?
No, this is going to be an organic. You are welcome to look at the, also contains non-plant food ingredients. So it has all the ingredients listed on here. It tells me what my nutrients. Now, you can make your own fertilizer. You do not have to go buy an expensive fertilizer. I've tried making my own soil. I've tried making my own fertilizers, and I just don't have that knack. So I'll spend a little more money for someone who does have the expertise to do that. And so this is what I use. But like for my potatoes, I'll use something more like this. Again, this is a brand. It's the same as this brand. I love this brand because they have everything so broken down by specialty as to what you're trying to grow that they have already done all the science. And you just need to go in, when you go into a garden center or before you go in and you want to ask, hey, what do I need for potatoes? They'll recommend bone meal, they'll recommend, some other things. What do I need for squash? What do I need for this? What do I need for that, right? Your fertilizer is going to really depend on what you're growing. So for my tomatoes, I'm going to put in probably anywhere from a half a cup to a cup of this just on the top, right? I'm going to put my plant in there. Tomatoes, I was talking to one of the other ladies about tomatoes. When you're planting tomatoes, you want to plant that tomato as deep as you can get. You're going to cut your leaves off probably from the side. You want to plant it as deep as you can get. You know all that fuzzy stuff that's on the stems? That will all, not all of it, that will help your rooting and stabilizing and making your plant stronger. So, I filled it with soil, I put in my fertilizer, I put my plant in, however deep it's going to go. My peppers I don't plant deep, just my tomatoes. Peppers I plant on the top. I leave about so much room here, and then I will put them in filtered sun, under a tree, no wind. You want to protect, so you saw on my picture the tomato cages, right? I use tomato cages. For indeterminates, it's important to use tomato cages, but for even my determinates, I use tomato cages because I can wrap that plastic if I need to protect from wind, if we get a really windy day. And it is really important to protect from wind. So that's how I will protect from wind, is with my plastic and my tomato cage. Again, a lot of times garage sales, estate sales, you can find things like that. Those tomato cages are expensive. I hate spending money on things that are not related to soil or fertilizer. So I do use these bamboo sticks a lot. I use them so much. Again, if when you put it in, you can put a bamboo stick and you can always break it to your size. They don't break very easily, and then you can just tie a little string on to keep your plant stabilized. So I think these are great. Does anyone like Chinese food? Yes? Yeah, everyone? Does everyone have any chopsticks laying around your house? These are the best for propping your new transplants and holding them. And if you need to hold them in place, if you need to hold, a stem up or something, if something's falling over, these are great. Don't ever throw these away. These are great. Does anyone have some plastic utensils and stuff? These are awesome for your label. You don't need to go buy expensive labels. I think everyone probably has some of these. You can write right on here. You probably need a Sharpie, but you can write right on here and stick it right in there what it is. How many of you have put in a plant that you don't know what it is? Raise your hand. You can do it with a spoon as well, right? You can write on a spoon and stick it in there, any of these plastic things. Wooden sticks don't work so great because the water does absorb in there, but they are good for if you need to stabilize something. Okay, so where are we at? How much time? Okay, 15 minutes, okay.
So if I have a little tomato plant, is this little, put it all the way deep?
So their question was if she has a little tomato plant like this. So is it in one of those little small containers like this? So I always pot up one more size. And what that means is this would be too big, but I would take that small one and I would put it in one more pot size, maybe not this big, but bigger than what it is. And I would go ahead and introduce it to my good soil, my premium soil. I'd introduce it to my premium soil. I would go ahead and stake it so that the stem grows straight. So I wouldn't plant from that small plant. I would wait till it got a little bigger in a bigger container. And part of that is, you know, the soil that I am putting in here is really expensive, and it takes a lot of time, and I want to make sure that that transplant is going to work from here to here before I put it in here. Because once you transplant something, especially if you get it from the nursery and you take it and you transplant it, the chances of dying are, you know, you get a pretty good chance of dying. So I'd rather it die in a smaller container than in my bigger container that I've, and you can always reuse the soil. Like I'm not saying you can't put something else there. You can always put something else there, but that's just my own personal take, is that I try to get my tomato plants a little bit bigger in a bigger container. That means the roots are bigger. That means they've already been through one transplant, so they're a little bit stronger. And you definitely want to harden off. Does everyone know what hardening off your plants? Hardening off your plants, so you don't want to move it straight from this little container to outside full time. You want to transition inside, outside, depending on weather conditions and stuff like that. Okay?
So I got so impatient with that though,
Impatient with?
with the hardening off. Because, you know, it was inside, I mean, you take it out for 2 hours or so, then you bring it back in, and the next day you take it back out. It was like a week and a half, and I just tossed them out. I mean,
You call someone, they'll come and get them from you. You know, it is like it is like your day. I'm going to get these tomatoes in the ground today, and I'm going to be done with it. And you got to have some patience if you're going to grow anything in West Texas, and it's just a patience, yeah.
Things I've done, you know, if you take it out and you set it on the porch or something, in the 12 noon, it's probably gonna wilt in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The direct sun. Put it out very early morning, very late evening, to let it get just a little bit of sun the first day. What I found that works, if you got some shrubbery, boxwoods or something there, stick it under there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it'll filter
The light.
sun,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll dampen the wind. And that seems to work. So you kind of got to figure out where the right spot is. Don't just, it'd be just like if you haven't had any sun exposure on your skin for 6 months in winter, and you go out there to the beach and take your clothes
You'll
off,
look just like John.
that plant is the same.
Yeah. You'll look just like John. John. Yeah. And I put mine. Yeah, I put mine next to a wooden fence where it gets some sun protection, and it's under a pecan tree, and you know the pecan tree leaves aren't quite as, you know, full yet, and so yeah, you have to select the right spot. And having having a tub, this is like one of the, I think, essentials that you have to have good tubs that you work soil in. I've got 3 tubs actually that I work soil in, that I carry things in and out, that I put water in and it catches it and stuff like that. So, okay, so kind of finishing up watering, the whole watering thing we're talking about. I do not mulch the top of my plants. You will see a lot of people say, oh, put mulch on, it'll keep the moisture in. I don't mulch until probably, well, who knows, right? Until the weather gets too hot. Because I want to know if the water is getting in, how much is getting in. I want the plant to grow some. I might want to move my containers around. But the most important thing is about 4 to 6 weeks after I put my plant in my container, I will go back. When it starts, you know, the little flowers starts blooming, I will go do about a half a cup of this. If I have some earthworm castings, I'll add some earthworm castings. I'll add a little more of my good soil. And I do what's called a top dressing. A top dressing, I just put about 1 inch right on the top of my container right there and water that in as well. And if I had mulch on it, it would not be easy for me to do a top dressing. So that fertilizer, that top dressing, when those blooms are starting, because that's when that plant needs energy. ooh, it needs food, it needs energy, it's going to start producing fruit. And that's where I think a lot of people don't get the fruit because they're not giving enough nutrients when the plant really needs it. When it gets super hot and I feel like I'm watering every day because it's so hot, I will use a fertilizer, fish emulsion, which is liquid. This is a liquid. You dilute it. It's very gentle. It's a 232 nutrient base. This is my water. I will put this on maybe once a week, once every other week. When it gets too hot and I'm putting a lot of water, and there's a lot of water leaching my nutrients out of here.
What is that again?
It's called fish emulsion. This one's called liquid fish blend, but fish emulsion, so the nutrient content is a 232. Remember on this one, it's a 573. Like Osmocote has, this is a 14, 14, 14. So this would be something I would put in the soil early on. So I use this for top dressing. I use this in between. Again, tomatoes are heavy, heavy feeders, and that's usually what I find is the biggest mistake that new gardeners make, is not giving the nutrients to the plants when they need it. Now my pepper plants, I don't treat my pepper plants like this. I probably should, but I do use this. Don't get me wrong, I do use this, but my pepper plants, even though they're in the same family as the tomato plant, they're nightshade plants, I just don't think my pepper plants need as much. I'll use this on my pepper plants, but I don't have to top dress as much. And so let's talk about, just real quick, the growing seasons. You know, Abilene, Texas has 2 growing seasons. Yeah? Most people are energetic in the spring and come July. So there's an expression I heard not long ago called, it's a race to July. And that's what's happening with our vegetables. It's a race to July because once July comes, your plants are just not going to be able to produce anymore. Doesn't get cool enough at night, it gets too hot in the day. That's when I move my containers into the shade, and I get my containers, whatever plants they are, to survive. I'm not looking for them to produce in July and August, or even September. I'm not producing, they're just surviving. So I'm keeping them watered, I'm doing a little bit of fish emulsion, not too much. I don't want too many nutrients because I'm not getting them to bloom. I'm not getting them to produce. I'm just getting them to survive those few months. And then come September, when our nights start cooling off a little bit more, I can move these back out. And for my pepper plants, that's when my pepper plants go boom. I have more peppers in the fall than I know what to do with. And I now have a good use for peppers if you want to grow hot peppers. But so for me, I know I can't get a lot of peppers before July, but come the fall is when I get all my peppers. That kind of, even though people say we have 2 growing seasons, I extend, and that's one of the great things about containers is you can extend your growing season by trying to know what is your idea. There are some years I'm just so fed up with the bugs and the pests and everything else that I'm done. I'm done, whack them off, empty my soil, I'm done, right? Until September, and I'm like, I should probably put something in September. But if you can get through that July, August, and get into September, my Roma tomatoes, so Roma tomatoes are a determinate. They supposedly produce all at once and grow all at once. I have another harvest, small one, not a big one, but I'll have another harvest in October, November. If I could keep it alive for the summer, keep a little bit of nutrition on it, a little bit, not much. When you bring it back out in the fall, when I bring it back out, then boom, they get hit with another top dressing of my really good fertilizer. And at that point, they may have mulch on them, because I may have put mulch on them maybe in June, July, and then I have to remove the mulch to do the top dressing. I see one yawn. Are we done? So, moving containers in and out of the shade is really, for me, one of my best advantages of doing the container gardening. Lightweight. Pests, I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about pests. I think birds are one of my biggest problems. Has anyone ever seen these? These little organza or whatever they're called. If you have a cluster of tomatoes that you're trying to keep, these are awesome for keeping birds away. If you have 1 or 2 plants, if you have 20 tomato plants, that might be kind of time consuming and expensive, but you're going to put these on when your tomatoes are green. Like, you can put these on and leave them. The sun doesn't have anything to do with them. It just protects from the birds. The birds cannot and will not. I've not had one bird get to any tomatoes when I've had my tomatoes covered with these. This is the one thing I've not been able to find in Abilene, Texas. This is the one thing I think you have to order online at Amazon. So that's one of those. Of course,
I don't think the color makes any difference because I have good ones that I've used.
I don't think so. I wouldn't think so. I don't think the color makes any difference.
You call those bags?
Yeah, it's like a party bag. Like I know they have them at Michael's in the wedding section, but they're terribly expensive. Terribly, terribly expensive, and not as big as these. I would go with, you can see these are 2 different sizes right here. I would go with the bigger ones if you're trying to do a cluster of tomatoes in one bag. So it's not like one bag per tomato, it's like the whole cluster. Of course, bird netting, the birds, it doesn't matter. I have begged the birds, here's your tomato plant, just stay on this one, and they won't. The pest, you have to look at your plants every day. Like I just, when you're gardening, you don't get to go on vacation. You don't get to go away on weekends unless you've got someone you trust watering your stuff. But your pests, I've had flea beetles absolutely destroy my plants. Of course, aphids are out there. Neem oil is probably one of my favorites. I use neem oil. It is something you dilute and you put it in a spray bottle. You have to read the instructions. I have not read the instructions. I haven't used it correctly, and I finally learned a couple weeks ago from one of our pest guys how to apply it appropriately. So it is important to apply it appropriately, but it's very safe for any of your plants. You can still eat and use this. I also use diatomaceous earth. I use a lot of I've got the big bag, and it comes with one of those little powder things, and I powder my plants like crazy if I see the signs of any kind of munching or anything like that. Diatomaceous earth, neem oil. I do use insecticide soap. I haven't bought any this year, so I haven't needed it this year, but those are kind of the things I use for the pests. Did I hit on everything? Your best time for treating your pest is nighttime. Don't treat your pest in the morning or in the afternoon for a couple reasons. Number one, the sunburn could damage your plants. And number 2, your good pests, like your ladybugs, those kind of things, are active in the daytime and not the nighttime. And you don't want to kill those. So applying your pesticide at night is, I think, a good lesson.
You want to kill them when they're asleep?
Kill it when they're asleep, or pinch them off, or whatever you have to do. Okay, anyone have any questions? I've kind of done this presentation a little different than I did the last one.
I do need to know why you put the molasses in the soil. What does that do?
Molasses is a sugar that feeds your good bacteria, your microbiomes. John, I know, has a lot more experience in terms of scientific knowledge of your molasses.
Yeah, it's basically, you're feeding the microbiome of the soil.
One little trick, we talked about containers. Anything can be a container. This bag can be a container. It's a canvas bag. It's got a cotton liner in there. I probably wouldn't even need to poke holes in it. Probably water will drip right through it. But this is a pretty big container. This is probably, close to a 3-gallon. Something like this would be super fun to put some herbs, something trailing, right? You can hang it up someplace. These are some things that I've seen on, YouTube or whatever, but this is a lot of soil. So if you have a container and you're putting something in it, like my herbs, I don't fuss over my soil too much with my herbs. I don't do a whole lot of nutrients with my herbs. The herbs that I grow, they're pretty sturdy. But if you don't want to use a lot of good soil in a bag like this, this is one of the tricks I've seen, and I've used it a couple of times. Take an empty container, right, an empty one of your plastic containers, and just turn it upside down in there, and it creates an air pocket. So it still allows you to put soil, and the soil your plant needs, but you've created an air pocket in there, and you don't need quite as much soil. That's just kind of one of the tricks if you're using a big container and you don't think you need that much soil for whatever you're growing in there. Yes, ma'am.
You had on here elevation of containers.
Elevation. So that's where I'm saying I put them on my pallets. I put them on pallets. I do not put my containers on the ground. There are things that live in the soil that might want to come up and get into my containers and ruin my containers. So like my coworker who has the big greenhouses, he uses the pallets because he's in a low area and water has a tendency to sit there. And you don't want your container sitting in any water. That would I highly, highly, highly recommend your containers not sit in any water. Like those trays that you use under containers in your house plants, I don't recommend those either because I think they hold too much water at the bottom. I want the water to drain out of my container. And so draining out of my container, elevated, I think works better on a pallet. And, I don't know. I have a little stool that I can sit on if I want to sit down there and look at my containers. And they're just elevated up a little bit. Free pallets, you can get free pallets anywhere. You do not need to buy pallets. So free containers, low-cost containers, pallets free, free, right, like your stabilizers and things. These are not free, but that's where I put my money is in the soil and the fertilizer.
Or do you say you get pallets?
Oh my goodness, so, I drive around town and I see them all over around town, and I just...
Feed stores have lots of pallets.
Feed stores. I was just driving somewhere and there was a big sign that said free, and they were nice pallets. They were good pallets, and where was that?
That's Jackson Brothers.
Jackson.
Well, there was something like that on Treadaway one day. The construction sites, there used to be some.
Yeah.
I know Henner Chevrolet has a lot right now they're trying to get rid of, so just call them and tell them you want some pallets. I got a call just the other day about, they just
Trying to get rid of some, yeah.
want them gone.
So my family business is a furniture store, so we get a lot of our furniture on pallets. So we just throw them back behind the warehouse, and if no one comes and picks it, if I don't take them home, then they just take them to the dump. Any other questions? I'm happy to stay around. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope I have given you some ideas for more successful container gardening.
Very good.
Thank you all very much.